What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees, and I got something special once again to tell you about this week. But welcome to week 6 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2023 CFL season, and boy, we were that close last week. Still a little bit underwater. Definitely showed improvement from the previous couple of weeks, which is good. We always want to see improvement. Damn near broke even last week. Very close. They got like half pointed on a line or two. We were 5-7, so we were close. We were right there. 3-1 straight up. That's an encouraging sign. That got us back up over 500 straight up for the season. So, look, the journey of a million miles begins with a single step. That is certainly a single step, and it's a step in the right direction. I just gave it back on the betting picks. I was only 1-3 against the spread and 1-3 on the total. So 5-7, 22-35 on the season. Very, very, very slow here to start the year, but tons of time left in the season. We're only at the quarter pole. So, I mean, there's tons of time left in this season. We're going to rebound. Had another very solid week in CFL fantasy. In week 5, I brought in 92.8 points, good enough for top 1150 across the whole game, and top 120 in Derek Taylor's league. Has me at 504 points even for the season, 304th overall in CFL fantasy football, and top 50 in Derek Taylor's league, now at number 49. So we're definitely hitting goals. We're playing good fantasy. We're heading towards the top of these leaderboards. Helping me out last week was my most outstanding player, BC Lions quarterback Vernon Adams, with a nice bounce back performance, at least fantasy wise. 305 all-purpose yards for Vernon last week, a passing touchdown. He did throw an interception. It was good for 17.2 points. Times 2 because he was my team captain, so good for 34.4 points of my 92.8 point output. I did have some players kind of relatively struggle throughout the rest of my lineup, but Vernon at the very least, Vernon delivered. This is a Monday night special. I'm recording this Monday evening a little after 8 p.m. Atlantic time. Did have to wait a little bit to get some lines, but what was really interesting about this is when me and the boys are in the CFL group chat talking about the lines and kind of predicting what they might be. My predicted lines were pretty darn good. I put them on Twitter and compare them to the lines as they sit right now. Pretty darn close in most aspects. So it feels good to be able to kind of predict what some of these lines are going to be and get that little bit of extra time to sort of think them through. I hope that pays dividends for me this week. Another 4-game slate here in week 6 in the CFL. Hamilton travels to Edmonton to take on the Elks. Toronto comes off their bye week. They head to Montreal. Ottawa is going to play host to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and Saskatchewan will play host to the Calgary Stampeders, who are on the tail end of back-to-back road games. Across the league last week, the under came to play. We are quickly back to #under season. The over only goes 1-3 last week and is on a 2-5 cold streak since the beginning of week 4. So points are definitely at a premium in most of these games. And part of the reason for the fact that there's not only a lot of unders, but also just the degree of unpredictability in the CFL so far this year is the rampant low quality of play from a lot of quarterbacks in this league. Here's a stat for you from last week. Obviously, 4 games last week, 8 starting quarterbacks. Of those 8 starting quarterbacks, only 2 did not throw an interception. They were Zach Collaros and Cody Fajardo. Every other starting quarterback last week threw at least 1 interception, and that includes starting quarterbacks that didn't even finish the game. So that, I feel, just kind of in a nutshell highlights the real problem with quarterback play early on in the CFL this season. We will waste no time and we will go right to Edmonton, where, as I mentioned, the Ticats are in town to take on the Elks. The Ticats scoring their much-needed first win of the season, despite what I thought was a pretty pedestrian offensive performance. They put up just 337 total yards. It doesn't jump off the page, but their defense came to play in that game, only allowing 322 and having 3 interceptions in the secondary. A nice bounce back game for a secondary that I've criticized over the last couple of weeks. Again, the Ticats, of course, benefited in that game from Jeremiah Masoli getting injured. We'll talk more about that. More news came out about that earlier today, which we will talk about. But speaking of quarterback injuries, since taking over as the Ticats QB1, Matthew Schultz, who I have both praised and criticized on this show, is a respectable 66% on his completion percentage. Just under 700 yards, basically in like 2.5 games or what have you. But in his 2 starts, he's thrown just 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions. As we talked about, inconsistent quarterback play just across the league. What we may have seen in that Hamilton-Ottawa game from last week, which was potentially the blueprint for shutting down this combination of Tim White and Duke Williams. I do imagine that the Elks are going to be pouring over game footage from this because they combined in that game last week to catch just 4 balls for 50 yards. And that's a fairly pedestrian secondary there in Ottawa, but they held those 2 very good receivers to pretty darn low numbers. I mean, Tim White, I think, 1 catch for 7 yards. On Edmonton's sideline, another week, another baffling way to lose a football game. Like, you've all seen the play. Everybody knows what happened. The newest and most insane way to lose a football game. Touchdown, they give up very late. 2-point conversion successful. The fluke single all within like less than 70 seconds from the end of the game. Like, it was right there. Once again, it was right there. Edmonton also missed 2 field goals in that game. That's 6 points. That's the difference right there. The Elks did go back to Taylor Cornelius for that game last week, and it basically worked out. I mean, the final result wasn't there, but Cornelius put up 284 all-purpose yards. He had a rush touchdown in that game. Can't really fault him on the interception that he threw. It was after the ridiculousness that now they're losing the game. He's trying to make a play there at the end. Probably could have done a better job of looking off the defender. He's not totally without fault, but he's trying to make a play to win the game. So I'm really not going to hold that against him. And hey, they're finally letting him run. Who would have thought one of the best rushing quarterbacks maybe should be allowed to run the football here and there? Need I remind you again, the Elks hired head coach Chris Jones before they hired their team president. One element of the Elks game that I was actually really impressed with last week was the run defense. I mean, the run defense has been much maligned. It's still statistically the worst run defense in the CFL, but they were pretty impressive in that game. They limited Jamal Morrow to just 52 rushing yards on 11 carries, and the Riders to just 78 on 16 as a team. They need to duplicate that kind of performance this week, and it's against a team that doesn't, even though they have James Butler, doesn't really run the ball super well and isn't crazy committed to running the football. I want to see a repeat of that performance from the Elks. 50-50 chance of rain in this game, which probably will wind up impacting the final score, and quite frankly, it's just kind of tough to get excited about these 2 teams right now. But there's one of these 2 teams that at the very least did kind of deserve to win last week and didn't get bailed out by a quarterback injury resulting in them playing a 3rd-string quarterback making his professional debut. Quite frankly, I thought the Elks' effort in both of their games against Saskatchewan was good enough to win both of those games. They wound up losing both of them. I'm big on rewarding effort, and I didn't necessarily see that same kind of effort despite the fact that Hamilton got the result. So between these 2 teams, from an effort perspective, yes, ladies and gentlemen, the last Taylor Cornelius defender strikes again. I am taking the Edmonton Elks at home to finally snap this massive home losing streak. If they're going to do it against anybody, they're going to do it against a team like Hamilton, who defensively, some of just the average numbers might look okay. But here's a stat for you. So far in the CFL, Hamilton is the worst defense in the CFL in terms of yards per point allowed. The Hamilton Tiger Cats are giving up a point defensively on the board for every 12.4 yards that they allow. So essentially, every 1.25 first downs is a point on the board for Hamilton's opposition. It ranks dead last in the CFL, and it's dead last by a lot. It's an interesting way of measuring it, but if Edmonton is able to rack up some yardage, which we know they can, Taylor Cornelius is able to do that, I think he's going to do that. I think the ground game is going to be very important in this game because you might have some rain. I'm going to go with the Elks. Call me a sucker. I've got Edmonton winning this game outright. And since I've got Edmonton winning the game outright, I'm also going to take them plus the points. The Elks are plus 2.5 against the spread. Like them to win. Give me the 2.5 points. Total in the game set at 42.5. It's a very low total. In fact, it's the lowest total of the week, and I'm still going to stay under on it. These are two unimpressive offenses in a game that pretty decent little chance, at least 50-50, that you're going to see some rain, which is probably going to emphasize the run game. I just don't think we're going to see a ton of points. So give me under 42.5 points in Hamilton, Edmonton. Let's go Elks 21, Ticats 17. Edmonton is off the schneid, and they get their first home win since 2019. Elks beat the Ticats. Let's go to Montreal now, where the Argos are in town. Probably an East Division final preview, if we had to guess. The Argos coming off their second bye of the season already. That could, spell some problems for them down the stretch. 2 early byes in the first 5 weeks of the season after absolutely tooling the BC Lions 2 weeks ago by a score of 45-24. A massive performance, especially on the defensive side. The Argos defense, of course, famously picking off Vernon Adams 6 times in that game, including a pick 6. It's no shock why the Argos have found all the success this season that they have. The Argos lead the CFL in average rushing yards per game as a team. They have a top 3 QBR for Chad Kelly, so he's not slinging the ball like all over the place for 300 and 400 yards a game, but Chad Kelly's moving the football very efficiently, and it's difficult to stop an offense like that. They've also allowed a league-low 4 quarterback sacks. They're protecting their very mobile quarterback very well, allowing him time to stand back there and make plays. No one has figured out what the penicillin is to this offense. And quite frankly, as long as Chad Kelly keeps having Chad Kelly games, and I would define a Chad Kelly game as like 275-ish yards all-purpose, so between passing and running, probably a pair of touchdowns, maybe one through the air, one on the ground. He's averaging a rush touchdown a game. Pretty evenly distributing the ball across his top 5 or 6 receivers. In fact, all of his top 6 receivers, I believe, have between 5 and 9 catches. So real even distribution on the season. Really nobody standing out in that Argos receiving core. As a matter of fact, Curly Gittens Jr., who's probably the best overall receiver on that team, I think might be 5th in actual catches. This team's a hard out. If Chad Kelly can be allowed to have a Chad Kelly game, very difficult to beat this Argos team. On the other side, in perhaps the truest representation of the pecking order in the East Division, the Alouettes were tooled last week by 16 points to that same Lions team who the Argos tooled by 21 just 2 weeks prior. So that kind of goes to show you what the pecking order is there in the East Division. And the non-Cody Fajardo related run game for the Alouettes, basically non-existent. 7 carries for 34 yards as a team to anybody that wasn't Cody Fajardo. So that's William Stanback just not getting the results. Speaking of Cody Fajardo, look, I got to give it up to the guy. Fajardo's playing probably his best football in years since I think 2018 was his real great season, I believe it was. He's on pace for career highs in pass yardage as well as career highs in rushing touchdowns. Like, he could hit 12 or 13 rush touchdowns this year, which would be a new career high, but he's got just 2 passing touchdowns on the season. Probably the only thing that's kind of keeping him out of my most outstanding player conversation. You got to be able to finish. And to this point, with his arm anyway, Fajardo's gotten great yardage, but isn't really finishing those plays, isn't really putting the ball in the end zone, despite having two great young receiving talents in Kai and Julian Grant and Austin Mack. In addition to the lack of a run game from anybody not named Cody Fajardo, a big area of concern for this Alouettes team, as far as I'm concerned, is that offensive line, and I've talked about them for a few weeks now. They allowed 7 more quarterback sacks in that game last week, allowing the second most in the CFL. They've allowed 18 in 4 games to this point. Only the Elks have allowed more. They've allowed 20 in 5 games, which actually means per game, Montreal's allowing more. And remember what I said about the bump card when I was talking about Trevor Harris? Same thing applies to Cody Fajardo. Cody Fajardo's not as old as Trevor Harris, but every quarterback has a bump card. And I'm very concerned that this Alouettes team is going to go out there and get their quarterback hurt. And that makes it super difficult to bet with them, especially in a game against a very high-powered opponent. So look, 60% chance of rain in terms of the weather in this one. So once again, I think the run game is going to have a big emphasis. I'm terrified that maybe this is the week that Cody Fajardo takes one hit too many. If he's limited, if you're looking at a backup quarterback situation, game could wind up getting ugly. Just that lack of a nimble ground game for the Alouettes, I think, just makes this an impossible upset pick for me. I'm going to give you another key number. We've done this a couple of times this season. My key number is Argos quarterback sacks, and I'm going to set the number at 4. If Montreal can keep the Argos from getting to Fajardo that 4th time, 5th time, 6th time, they might be in a position to pull the upset here. If the Argos start getting into that sack number 5, sack number 6, sack number 7, I think it's fait accompli. So we're going to definitely go with the Argos here because I think that is the outcome that we're going to wind up seeing, is that pass rush just start to dominate for Toronto, which is they've been very good this year as well. So let's go ahead and grab the Argos there straight up on the road in Montreal off the bye to beat the Alouettes. Now, on the line, Montreal is taking +4 here as our second straight home dog. And this one for me, I think, was going to be Toronto minus anything under a touchdown. I thought this line was going to be closer to 2. Not because I think Montreal is almost as good as Toronto, but the fact that Vegas wildly undercredits the Toronto Argos for just how good they are. So the fact that we did get 4 is a nice middle ground. I really thought this number was going to be closer to 5 or 6, but maybe if it was in Toronto, the number would be a 6, I think, for sure. But it's a 4, and I'm more than happy to lay -4 on the better team. That's the Toronto Argos. Argos -4. Total in the game, the largest total of the week at 48.5 points. This is a pretty good number, and I think if there wasn't such a high probability of rain, I might look it's a pretty perfect number. I think it's going to be close one way or the other, but the rain here I think is going to keep this an under for me. I'm going to stick under 48.5 points. It's also just the way the league is trending right now. So let's stay under 48.5 points in Toronto, Montreal. Let's go Argos 28, Alouettes 18. Again, I think opportunistic Argos defense might pull a turnover or 2 in this one. I think the pass rush keeps getting home, keeps the game a relatively low scoring if we don't see a defensive touchdown. I should have a caveat there. If we see a defensive touchdown, this total is probably going to go over. But if we don't, and it's, you can't bank on one of those happening every game, I think it stays under, but that's how close this number is. It's a really good one. Halfway home here in the Week 6 episode, and I'll take this opportunity, as I always do, to shout out my great friends and sponsors at Nerd Teas and Coffee Bean. In fact, nerdteas.ca is where you need to go to find great new things like this bad boy. It's finally trying one of the new estate and flavored coffee blends. This one is chocolate raspberry. And I'm not a coffee drinker, but this is really good. Should I be having coffee at 8:30 in the evening? Definitely not. But when it tastes this good, what are you supposed to do? Go to nerdteas.ca, find out what tastes so good for you, and you can use my promo code, which is BWFinest. That's going to save you 15% at checkout. You're going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100. And if you're one of my viewers in the US, a great conversion rate on the US dollar. Nerdteas.ca, Promo code is BWFinest. Save you 15%. Get your free shipping. Find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it at nerdtease.ca. We're going to head to the nation's capital now, where the Ottawa REDBLACKS are going to play host to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And speaking of the Bombers, it was a very Bombers win in Week 5. Despite allowing 10 points in the first quarter, trailing this game by 9 at the end of that quarter, the defense clamped down and closed the game against the Stampeders on an immaculate 23-1 run to win that game by a couple of possessions. After the first quarter, it was like the Bombers said, okay, that we've had our fun, game on now. And the Stamps just had no answer. And I said, I didn't trust Jake Maier to win that game. He didn't win that game. Again, the Bombers are so embarrassingly perfect for Canadian football. There's not a ton to talk about with them. Everything was very sharp and everything was on point. Every aspect of that game was on point for the Bombers. The pass game was on point. The run game was on point. Brady Oliveira continues to impress. They're doing great things with Greg McCrae, getting Greg McCrae involved in that pass game out of the slot, a little bit out of the backfield. They're doing great things with him on offense. The run game was there. The discipline was there, which I've talked about for the Bombers, especially from a couple of weeks ago. They had a very undisciplined football game. I think it was the game against BC. They were very disciplined in this one, didn't take a ton of penalties. And a big step forward for the secondary, who I've criticized a couple of times on this show. They allowed just 127 pass yards in that game to both Jake Maier and Tommy Stevens. They had an interception as well, and they held all but one Stampeders receiver under 45 yards receiving. They locked that offense down, and it led them to a win. Over to the REDBLACKS sideline we go, and as I talked about, they lost far more than just the game last week. Jeremiah Masoli goes down again to a non-contact lower body injury. Dustin Crum is going to be the de facto QB1 for the REDBLACKS moving forward, assuming they don't do something in free agency or a trade or something. There's a couple of pretty capable backup quarterbacks who they may want to explore trade options for to try to bring them in. Their quarterback room is so good. It's just so injured right now. Obviously, the news came out earlier today that the Masoli injury is a ruptured Achilles. He is officially done for the year. And for an incredible person like Masoli, and by all accounts, he seems like he's the best dude in the world. God, I wish we could see him on the football field doing what he loves. So it's a very unfortunate situation. And I echo what a lot of people have said, which is we're just gutted for Jeremiah and hope the recovery is great. And fingers crossed that we see him back out on the field again next year. But it is officially Dustin Crum's time as starting quarterback, and he obviously has some severe limitations as a passing quarterback, at least at this level, which I think was evidenced by only 149 yards passing with 2 interceptions in that game last week against, a statistically fairly weak secondary. Of course, he wasn't expecting to have to play or to have to step into the starter's role, so we can kind of forgive him for that, but we didn't see a ton with the arm that was super impressive. What we did see is that guy can run the football. Holy cow. 6 carries for 91 yards on the ground and a rush touchdown. That's where this offense is going to get real interesting, because they're back to having that I hesitate to say, but kind of that Caleb Evans type where he can be so impactful with his legs, or like a Taylor Cornelius type too. So impactful running the football, it might add an interesting wrinkle to this REDBLACKS offense. Justin Hardy and Jalen Acklin in that game combined to catch 11 balls for 109 yards. Shades of what could have been with this REDBLACKS offense under Jeremiah Masoli. Now it's kind of going to be a wait and see. What is Dustin Crum going to turn into as a quarterback at this level? We shall see. Again, all love and respect to Dustin Crum in this position. He is now in an impossible position, as far as I'm concerned. I wish him all the best. This week ain't going to be it. And this is a game that could wind up getting ugly. Definitely going to be on Winnipeg in this one. I just can't see a rookie quarterback going in and beating this team that's coached this way and that plays this well. So we're definitely on Winnipeg here. Bombers go into Ottawa and beat the Red Blacks. Now on the line, the Red Blacks are taking plus 8.5 right now, which is exactly what I thought the line was going to be at 8.5. It's kind of tempting, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, because Winnipeg is not offensively lighting the league on fire right now. But if the defense that showed up against Calgary is the one that shows up against Ottawa, Winnipeg's going to cover 8.5. I don't see it going any other way. So we're going to go ahead and lay the minus 8.5 points on the Blue Bombers. Total in the game here set at 44. Ottawa has not hit one single over yet this year. Winnipeg, I believe, is 2-3 to the over this year, if my math is correct there. So it's got to be an under lean on this one, even though 44 is such a beatable number. But I just don't know how much we're going to see from the Red Blacks offense. So I got to see it first before I start taking some overs, especially with the way the league is trending. So let's take under 44 points in Winnipeg, Ottawa. Let's go Bombers 26, Red Blacks 10s. We got the Bombers to win, the Bombers to cover, and give me the under on the 44. And the last game we're going to look at is the Calgary Stampeders on the tail end of back-to-back road games in Saskatchewan to take on the Riders. Starting on the Stamps side, look, they started that game hot. Like I mentioned, they scored the first 10 points of the game, and they limped to the finish. Like after that point, they were outscored 23-1. They gave up 23 unanswered points after scoring a single to go up 11-1, I believe, at that or 11-1 at that point, I believe it was. Gave up 23 unanswered points. And that was behind another not good enough effort from their starting quarterback. Just wasn't enough for Jake Maier. He's thrown at least one interception in every single game this season. It's not good enough. One game of 300 plus yards, 2 games where he didn't get to 200. And here's the problem. If it was any other context, then Stamps fans might not have that itch. You know what I mean? The reason they have that itch is this is the guy they held on to replace Bo Levi Mitchell. Now look, it's not like Bo is in Hamilton, boy, really making them regret that they made that change. Like, he wasn't playing well and then unfortunately got hurt. But like so far, Maier has done very little as the de facto runaway number one starting quarterback to instill the confidence of the fan base. As a matter of fact, this year's Calgary Stampeders may only go as far as Dedrick Mills drags them, potentially kicking and screaming. 14 carries for 97 rush yards and a touchdown. He has touched the ball at least 15 times in all 3 of his games this year and has at least 87 all-purpose yards. No, in every game this year. And I don't think there's any other Stampeders player other than Jake Maier who can say that. So he's the focal point of the offense. As he goes, so goes the offense. If they keep him involved, even more touches, like 20 touches, potentially 25 a game, you got to commit to the run game. You got to commit to keeping him as involved in the pass game as possible. This offense is only going to go as far as Dedrick Mills takes them. Now, on the plus side, like the Stampeders were not obliterated defensively in that game last week. They allowed 332 total yards, which is not crazy. They had 3 quarterback sacks, which is decent. And no Winnipeg skill player other than Brady Oliveira had 80 all-purpose yards or more. It was just Brady Oliveira, and that's because he's so involved in every little bit of that Bombers offense. Other than that, everybody else across the board had fewer than 80 all-purpose yards. So like the defense did a good job. The offense needs to be putting the defense in better, more advantageous situations. They didn't do it last week. On the other side, we had the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and this was the second time this season that the Riders get essentially gifted a win against Edmonton. It was a goal line stand in the first game, and this one, obviously, we know what happened with the poor guy not knowing the rules about the Rouge, right? In most facets in that game last week, the Riders were the second best team, in my opinion, on the field, but they won it late. It was, in fact, I think last week was a worse performance than the one that they put up in week 1. The Riders did allow significant yardage on the ground to the Elks last week, who ran for 143 yards on 32 carries as a team. So they were definitely able to get chunk yardage, chunk plays on the ground. They also allowed 4 quarterback sacks on Trevor Harris. Bump card. In my opinion, this Riders performance, that effort, did not deserve to win that game last week. And I'll go a step further. The Riders are a straw man 3-1. All right? They're a 3-1 football team that should be a 1-3 football team. And if the team that they've played twice was coached by anybody other than Chris Jones, maybe not Orlando Steinauer, but basically anybody other than Chris Jones, the Riders would be 1-3. And I think that's just a fact of life. They can be a decent football team, but they'd still be 1-3 because those 2 efforts against Edmonton, as far as I'm concerned, they didn't deserve to win either one of those games. And whether I was wearing this t-shirt or I wasn't, I'd feel the same way. People talking about, I said it last week, people talking about this Riders team like they're the 4th best team in the league. I don't know what games you're watching. I really don't. That said, the Riders are still a decent team. They're still a decent team. And they've definitely got the better quarterback in this matchup. In fact, Jake Maier versus Trevor Harris should be a more marquee, prestigious quarterback matchup than it is right now. This should be a passing of the torch type of quarterback matchup. Instead, it's a quarterback matchup of a guy that's not getting great O-line protection, but is still putting up great numbers against a guy that's getting fairly decent protection and just can't seem to get it done. So despite what I've said about the Riders in this segment, I'm going to take the better quarterback against the statistically slightly worse secondary, the secondary that's allowing a higher QBR against opposing quarterbacks. So I'm going to take the Riders because I'm going to take Trevor Harris. Let's take the Riders to get the win here at home against the Calgary Stampeders. Calgary's woes continue. Riders get the win at home. On the line, Sasky is laying 3.5 points here as a home favorite, the only home favorite of this week. You don't see that every day. I think I got to lay those points. Like, if I like them to win, taking plus 3.5 is such a tiny, tiny hedge. It's not a good hedge. Like, it's not like this is an 8.5 like you got in Winnipeg and Ottawa. I'd probably be on the 8.5 points all day for Calgary. But it's not. It's 3.5 points. And it's just such a small margin there. So we're going to go ahead and lay the minus 3.5 on the Riders. Total in the game set at 44, and this is the one game this week that I do believe goes over the point total. I think there's going to be points to be scored on both sides here. I think the Stamps offense has something to prove in this game. They're going to try to. It's just not ultimately, I don't think, going to be enough to win. But I think there's going to be points on both sides. 44 is just too low of a number. This is the one that goes over. Over 44 points in Calgary, Saskatchewan. Let's go Riders 27, Stamps 20. Riders win, Riders cover, and give me the over on the points. There you go, folks. Those are your picks for Week 6 in the CFL. Let's go over them here with you again one more time. I've got the Edmonton Elks with the upset at home. Edmonton beats the Hamilton Ticats 21-17. I'm taking the plus 2.5 on the Elks. Game stays under 42.5 points. I got the Toronto Argos beating the Montreal Alouettes 28-18 in Montreal, laying the minus 4 on the Argos in a game that stays under 48.5 points, just barely. I got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Ottawa beating the Red Blacks by a final score of 26-10. Winnipeg wins. Winnipeg covers the minus 8.5 point spread. Game stays under 44 points. And I got the Saskatchewan Roughriders at home beating the Calgary Stampeders 27-20. I'm laying the minus 3.5 on the hometown Riders and taking over the 44-point total. Obviously, it's Monday, so can't give you the fantasy roster because don't have the costs and all the fun stuff and blah, 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 blah. The thing that I say every week, get on it and fix it, please. So, fantasy considerations for Week 6. Quarterback position, I've basically got it narrowed down to 4 potentially. Chad Kelly, I think, is an excellent option this week. Zach Collaros is basically always an excellent option. I might lean like a Taylor Cornelius. I like him to win and to get over 20 points. So Cornelius might be an option. Or depending on what my money situation looks like, maybe I might even roll out Dustin Crum. At the running back position, AJ Ouellette, I think we can basically go right ahead and pencil him into my lineup this week. I think you're probably going to have to spend up at running back this week yet again. Brady Oliveira is a great option for you. Dedrick Mills, of course, as well. I'm really going to heavily consider Greg McCrae because I think he's very affordable. I think he's under $7,000. So that's kind of the same thought process behind like Demontre Tuggle that I've done in the last couple of weeks. Same thing for McCrae, and he's very involved in that offense. So I think he's probably somebody that I might even slide into my flex position. At wide receiver, Austin Mack, Kyan Julian Grant, both great options out of Montreal. Stephen Dunbar obviously has taken over as the top wide receiver target for Taylor Cornelius in Edmonton. Sean Bain, or a couple of the other Riders wide receivers. Riders do a fairly decent job of getting most of their receivers in play, and I think they're going to score up to them, close to the most points this week, so that's definitely a consideration. Duke Williams, but not Tim White. Obviously, last week's performance by Tim White kind of scared me off a little bit, and we all know White will be max money. Drew Wolotarski is having a tidy little season so far with Winnipeg, so definitely going to take a peek at him. Justin Hardy might be a dart throw. Trey Odom's Dukes for Calgary might be a dart throw. In terms of defense, I mean, Winnipeg is going to be the premium choice for me this week. If not, Edmonton, I think, will be low cost. Hamilton will be low cost. Probably going to try to save some money once again on the defensive side. So honestly, I could really see myself going Edmonton. There you have it, folks. Just shy of 45 minutes of recording time anyway. The Week 6 episode is in the books. It's Monday night. I'm going to get this thing out, and then I'm going to go to bed. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Teas and this delicious, delicious chocolate raspberry coffee. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. As always, the viewership and the support has been incredible at the beginning of this season. I couldn't ask for more so far. We're only on to bigger and better things from here, and it starts this week. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again in lucky week number 7.